Hi there, it's Colleen from Made for Mermaids. Welcome to day 2 of our Sierra Sew Along. Today we're going to be working on all of the tank bodice options. So I'm going to start with the full bodice, then the cutout bodice, and then finally the open back bodice option. So to hopefully make it easier for you when I'm showing the different burrito rolls and things, I've made the lining for all 3 of my options gray. So hopefully that'll make it a little bit easier. And I'm only going to show how to stabilize the bodice seams with my clear elastic on the first one, but you can use the same method for all 3 options. So I find that sometimes on the edge, my serger kind of likes to shift the elastic. So if you have a little bit of washable, wash away stabilizer, you can put that right up there. And it'll give the serger something to grab onto so that your elastic kind of stays put. And if you want, you can trim it, but when you wash your fabric, it'll wash right off. So I don't really worry too much about it. So when you're stabilizing the bodice seams, make sure that you're not stretching your elastic or your bodice pieces, and you'll just run it through the serger or your sewing machine if you're using a sewing machine instead. After you've done the lining pieces, you'll want to repeat the same for the main bodice pieces. So you'll line up the center seams, and you can clip it if you want, but it's such a short space that I usually do not clip it. And while you have them like this, one of the things that I like to do, since they're a little bit hard to distinguish unless you're really paying attention, is you can just stick a little clip on the back, and that'll help you remember which is the back bodice and which is the front, because it is pretty easy to get them turned around. So I just clip them like that, and that helps me keep them organized. And I actually do the same with skirts too. Anytime I'm working with skirt pieces, I stick a clip on the back, and it's always the back, and then that helps me remember which is which. I just have little pieces of wash away stabilizer that I'm going to use to start that seam, just because it keeps the elastic right where I want it. And that's pretty easy to find. I think that one, I bought a huge roll of it on Amazon the last time I ordered it. I would show you the packaging, but I think I just tossed it. Sorry. So you'll place it 1/4 inch in with the stabilizer if you want it, although you certainly don't need it. And then after you've done that, you want to repeat the same with the main bodice pieces. You'll sew those shoulder seams together. So now that we've done step 2 and step 3 for our full bodice option, we're going to go on to step 4, which is finishing the neckline. And it's fairly straightforward. We're going to match our front seam, our back seam, and our shoulder seams. And you can see that the clips kind of come in handy because it takes the guesswork out of it. And I like to sort of nest my seams just so it feels a little bit less bulky and kind of stitches together easier, but you can definitely press them back the same direction if you want to. At this point, you may want to put another clip on the back if you want, just so it's easier to keep it straight. You can also press your seams. I just kind of finger press it because it's just a little bit quicker. To get it rolled all the way to the opposite side, you kind of flip it. So that's going to come under. But now your 2 clips should match. And you do have to do a little bit of squishing to make sure that all of your fabric gets out of the way, because you really don't want any of your extra pieces to get rolled up here. So you just kind of have to smush it down. And I usually only clip it in 3 places, but you can definitely clip it in more if you would like. I usually just do 1 in the middle and then 1 at each end. So you can see it looks like this now. And the whole other side, the rest of the bodice is all rolled up in here. Bodice here, both right sides out, and I've clipped both sides of the shoulder seam of the side that I'm working on finishing right now. And you really are, just as the name suggests, going to roll it like a burrito. So you're going to take both sides, and hopefully you can see it. Take both sides and roll it up really tight. So now that you have your arm side clipped, you can do more clips than this if you want. I usually just do 3, one at each end and one at the shoulder seam. We're going to sew it with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you may want to go in and kind of push the extra fabric out of the way just to make sure it doesn't get caught in the serger, because that's really easy to do. And especially if your knife is engaged, you can't undo it. So we're going to sew that up really quick with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Okay, so now one side of your bodice will have a finished arm side, and you will be ready to work on the other side. So you can see it's finished there. The seams are all enclosed. So now we'll do the same on the opposite side, and again you may want to put clips there so you know it'll be a little bit easier this time since the other side is already done, but I like to do it anyway just to make sure. And so you'll do the same thing where you roll it. So you can see I'm rolling it here. And then you just kind of wrap the unfinished arm side around it so you can kind of see. So here are my 2 clips and the finished arm side. The rest of the bodice is rolled up in between. So I'll clip my shoulder seams here. And again, just kind of smush the rest of the bodice out of the way so it doesn't get eaten by your serger. And you can put a clip at each end of the arm side or wherever you usually clip. Those are usually the only parts that I do on the arm side. This will also be a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and you'll just want to push the rest of the bodice out of the way so it doesn't get cut off, and then stitch it on up. Now we can turn that side of the bodice the right side out. And so now both of your arm sides are finished. Again, you can press it or you can just kind of finger press it and flatten the seams there. So now for the full bodice option, we're going to skip ahead to step 8, and that's enclosing the side seams. So you are going to take your front bodice and flatten it out. So you can kind of see. So see, I have it laid flat here, and then you're just going to take your back bodice and lay it on top like this. You can see it's kind of like that. And then you're just going to want to match up seams and the top and bottom of your side seams. And you'll do that on either side. You'll sew those side seams up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. that the only exposed or unfinished seams should be the very bottom of your full bodice. So that is all for the full bodice option. The next tank option we're going to sew up is the cutout option. So we will start by doing the shoulder seams and the center seams, and it will be the same as the full bodice option. And I'm not using elastic in these just because it's a smaller size and I'm just sewing it up really quick to show you. But you can certainly add the clear elastic if you would like it. So again, this is a 1/2 inch seam allowance for all center seams and all shoulder seams for all 6 options. Once you've done the center seams, you'll want to sew up your shoulder seams. So you'll match your bodice pieces with right sides together and stitch the shoulder seams with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And repeat the same step for your lining pieces. After you've sewn up your shoulder seams and your center seams, you're going to want to finish up your neckline. So you will clip at the shoulder seams and match up your center seams, and then stitch together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Will be to finish up the arm side for both sides, and then after that we'll finish the cutouts. So just like last time, just like on the full bodice, I like to mark both points that I'm trying to meet up on the arm side. So you'll clip both shoulder seams that you're going to match, and then you're going to roll the opposite side of your bodice. So this is kind of where the clips come in handy because you can pull those clips together to match up. And then I like to put a clip on each end of the arm side. And then push the rest of your fabric out of the way so it doesn't accidentally get sucked up into the serger. And then finish up your arm side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. So when that side is done, you can turn it right side out, and then we'll finish up the opposite side. Something about this fabric, it does not want to turn. There we go. can see my one finished arm side. And then we'll finish up the other side. You can clip it again if you would like. I just do one at each shoulder seam, one at each side of the shoulder seam. And it just makes it easier to make sure that you're sewing the right pieces together, because that would be really frustrating to sew the wrong piece. So you just roll it toward the opposite side again, and then you wrap around so that your clips meet, your shoulder seams meet. And then you can clip either end of the arm side again. Push that fabric out of the way to make sure your serger doesn't eat it. And stitch it up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After you sew up the second arm side, you can pull it so that that side is also right side out. So at this point your bodice should look like this, with 2 finished armholes and unfinished cutouts and unfinished side seams. If you want, you can take a minute and you'll see the back of your bodice is a little bit lower. So if you want to put a clip there just to mark it, so you can burrito roll your cutouts as well. So I like to clip that part too, just to make sure that I'm sewing the right piece to the right piece. So you can see I just put a clip on either side. So now you'll take your bodice and you're going to roll it toward the side that you're sewing, the side that you've clipped. And it's a little bit harder because there's not much to it. But you can see it's kind of, the rest of your bodice is tucked back there. And you'll clip that cutout right sides together, and then we'll sew that up with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I know so far the other seam allowances have been 1/2 inch, but this one is a 1/4 inch. So when you turn it right sides out, it will look like this. So you'll have this side seam here unfinished and the bottom unfinished. And now we'll repeat for the other side of this cutout. I'll put my clips there so I make sure I'm sewing the right pieces together. Roll it up again to get all that fabric out of the way. Wrap your pieces around. And then you may need to push the fabric out of the way. And then again, sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And your front at this point will look like this, with both cutouts finished with their enclosed seams and your arm size finished with enclosed seams. So now we'll do the back bodice cutouts. And you'll notice the back bodice cutouts are a little bit smaller than the front, so that makes it even more challenging to get all of this extra fabric out of the way. So you may want to roll your burrito a little bit smaller if you can, a little bit tighter, so that it's easier to shove out of the way. Like that. And I'm not even going to clip those together really, because it's such a small piece that my serger would eat the clip before I had a chance to get it out of the way. Now we'll undo it and we'll do the other side. Even though it's the last one, I'm still putting the clips there because it would be really easy to accidentally sew up the side seam or just another piece. So burrito roll again, can see I have my bodice all rolled up here, and then you basically just wrap the bodice and the lining around it with their right sides together, and then push the rest of the fabric out of the way, and that's the little part that you sew up there, the part with the clips on it. Our last step for the side cutout bodice is finishing the side seams, and this part can get a little bit confusing, so I'll try to show it as best I can, but some of it is a little bit hard to see. So the first step is to turn half of your bodice inside out. So you can see I have the back bodice turned inside out, and the front bodice is right side out. So now you'll take your front bodice and place it inside of your back bodice with right sides together. And you're going to match up the side seams here. So I'm going to clip it where the seams match up. And then you'll do the same for the opposite side. So again, you'll match up your side seams. In this part, you're sewing it in the round, which is a little bit challenging, especially for those little sizes, but don't sew all 4 layers of fabric together or you won't be able to turn your bodice back. That would not be good. I have a little date with a seam ripper. So it should look like, well, this is kind of not easy to show, but it should look like this, where you have 2 clips and the pieces are matched up on the side seam, and then you can see I have my open bottom seams there. So there's my clips on this side, and then we'll stitch that together, and that one is 1/2 inch seam allowance. So it's a little bit hard. You need to definitely go slowly if you're using the serger to make sure you don't catch any fabric that you're not supposed to, or catch your fingers, or catch a clip, or anything like that. And before I turn it right side out, I will finish up the other side. So now when we turn it right side out now, you'll notice that the only seam that isn't finished is the bottom seam. And at this point you could press all of your seams. I'm probably not going to, I'm not gonna lie. But if you want a more finished, more professional look, you would definitely be able to seam it, give it a good press. So you can see my arm sides are finished, side cutouts are finished, side seams are finished. So we are good to go on our cutout bodice. So of course our first steps are to sew up the shoulder seams and the center seams. So I'm going to do that really quickly, and then we will finish up our back seam and our side seams. Before you start sewing, make sure that on your front bodice pieces you have the side cutout done, because if you'll notice, you will need that in order to match up your side seams. If you cut out the full front bodice, it will not match up to the open back bodice. Okay, so just double check your pieces if you're doing this option. After you've done the center seams and the shoulder seams, you're going to want to finish your neckline. So you'll match up the shoulder seams, the center seams, and clip or pin them there. And then sew your neckline using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. After you finish your neckline, turn your bodice right side out. And then we're going to finish up our arm side. So, as I did in the other two bodice options, I like to put clips on the arm side that I'm working on so I can keep my pieces straight. And then we're going to burrito roll. So you roll your bodice toward the side that you've clipped. And then you wrap your fabric around your burrito roll basically. And then put a clip right at the shoulder seam there. Push the burrito roll, the extra fabric, out of the way, your bodice out of the way, so that it doesn't get caught up in your seam. And I like to put a clip at either end of the arm side and at the shoulder seam. Make sure all that fabric is out. So your piece should look like this right now. And then we'll sew up the arm side with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We'll turn that right side out. so that we can do the opposite side. You don't have to clip it on the other side if you don't want to. I still like to do it just to keep my pieces straight. Just makes it really easy to know what you're matching up. We'll do our burrito roll. Oh, well, I need to straighten my pieces out here. There we go. So I'll roll it toward the side that I've clipped, the unfinished arm side. Wrap it around. Make sure that your clips match up. Go ahead and clip your shoulder seam together, and then you can clip either end of the arm side. If you want to clip along other places, you can. I usually just only clip those 3 pieces. Or those 3 points, I mean. And we'll stitch that up with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. We'll turn that right side out. At this point, if you want to give your bodice a press, you can. I usually just finger press it and call it good. And then we can put a clip in the back just to keep your back straight from your front. Especially when you're attaching the waistband, it's handy to have that clip there so you don't have to think about it. If you want here, you can add clear elastic. I used all mine up earlier, so I'm not going to, but this is another great place to use that elastic to help stabilize the seams, especially if you're using something like rayon spandex or if you're making one of the upper sizes. This one's just a size 3, so my daughter will grow out of it probably before the seams start to sag. Now we'll pull it right sides together, or we'll pull it right side out. Oops. Our next step is to finish the cutout, so we'll be doing another burrito roll. And if you're feeling pretty good about the burrito roll and you want to do kind of both sides together, you can. You may want to just do 2 different color clips. So see, I did pink on one side and green on the other, so I know which side is going to which side. But it may make it just a little bit easier since those are the only 2 pieces we have to do for the open back option. Because if you notice, we're basically rolling the same piece. So it'll just make it a little bit quicker for you if you want to do it that way. But I do suggest using color-coded clips, that way you know you're sewing the right piece to the right side, because that would not be fun. Remember to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance instead of a 1/2 inch seam allowance on the cutouts. Then you can do the opposite side with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we'll go ahead and turn that right side out. This is the only version where you will have to finish the back bodice seam because the waistband won't finish it off. So put a clip on either side of your back center seam. And I took my clip off here because now that the seam will be finished, I'll know which side the back is anyway. We're going to burrito roll the front bodice all the way to the opposite side to meet the back bodice. And then we'll kind of roll the back bodice around it with right sides together. Clip your center seam, and then you can do a clip on either side. or either end of the back seam there, bottom seam. And then we'll stitch that together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You can see when we turn it right side out that we have our finished back seam, our armholes are finished up, and we have our finished cutout. So the last step for the bodice is to sew up our side seams. So turn the front bodice inside out, and then you'll place the back bodice inside of the front bodice with right sides together, and you're just going to match up those side seams. And I like to put a clip on either side to keep my seams together. And remember, you're sewing this in the round, not 4 layers of fabric flat together, otherwise you won't be able to turn it. You'll have to seam rip that, and that is not fun. If you want, you can go ahead and do both sides, and we'll do them together. Just make sure that you didn't get it twisted around. Make sure that it's matched up the right way and not upside down, because otherwise that would be a problem too. So we'll sew this together with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. Then we'll do the opposite side. After you've sewn up your side seams, you can go ahead and turn your bodice right side out. And your bodice should look like this, where the only unfinished, unenclosed seam is the front bottom of your bodice. Thanks for joining us for day 2 of our Sierra Sew Along. We went over all 3 bodice options for the tank style bodice. Tomorrow is day 3, and we will be going over the same options but with the addition of the flutter sleeve that's included in the pattern. See you tomorrow. Bye.